Hi, I'm Liam Dann. Welcome to another season of Money Talks, a podcast about our relationship with money. We're not going to tell you how to get rich. We're not going to try and pick the next interest rate move. In this series, I'll be talking to some interesting New Zealanders about how money has shaped their lives and what they've learned about it through the years. With me today, I have investment banker turned politician, top party leader, Raf Manji. Kia ora, Raf.
Kia ora, Liam.
Welcome to Money Talks. You're also a Londoner turned Kiwi, is that right?
That's correct, yes. I'm born and raised in London and moved to New Zealand in 2002 to live. So I've been here just over 20 years. First came here in 1988 as a backpacker.
Wow.
So I'm reasonably well acquainted with the place, almost a local, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say it's sort of turned Kiwi, turned Cantabrian to some extent.
Well, exactly. I've actually spent more of my adult life here in Christchurch than in London.
Gosh, that's a bit like me in Auckland. I'm a Cantabrian turned Aucklander, but still supporting the Crusaders, I think. But you did your time, really. I'd say, the hard yards, really. Christchurch City Council, that's getting pretty involved in the local politics. What sort of drove you to jump? I guess the money question is to jump from the world of investment banking to local body politics, where I'm guessing the paychecks are a little different.
Yeah, well, there was a sort of 10-year gap in between that, because when I moved to Christchurch, I'd left banking and was working actually in the startup space in environmental technology, and I went back to university here when I got here. And then I actually thought I wanted to do some volunteer work alongside some general investing I was doing. So I started working for Christchurch Budget Services, because I thought, what skills do I have that I can actually give back? And I spent nearly 6 years with them. And that was a real wake-up call for just the struggles that so many people had, even back then. So this was sort of 2004 to 2009, in just managing their finances. And getting into debt and trying to work their way out of debt. And yeah, it was a fascinating time. I enjoyed it. So I love talking to people about money and helping them with money. And I love a budget and a spreadsheet. And yeah, but it was quite difficult putting people into personal insolvency and bankruptcy. But, for some of them, that was the only route out. And also talking to some of the debt companies about some of their poor practices and the outrageous interest rates that people were signing up to without really understanding the impact.
Yeah.
Where, I would explain to someone, as soon as you bought this, you were already toast. There was no way you could actually pay this thing off with the interest rate that you were being charged. So there was a lot of predatory lending. And I'd gone back to university in 2011 to do a delayed master's at UC. And I was sitting there on the 22nd of February, 2011, when the ground... I was sitting right outside the James Height, so the library for those who don't know University of Canterbury, and the library started swinging around.
Yeah,
you can imagine that thing moving. And so over the next couple of years, I got involved with the Student Volunteer Army and became the chair and, supported Sam and the team, in that sort of earthquake response, but also the post response as well, and actually trying to see, could we keep the legacy going, and what could we take out of this and drive into the future. And obviously it's going great guns today, which is pretty cool. And in that period, I met obviously a lot of politicians from time to time, and met Leanne, and she was obviously thinking about standing for the mayoralty. And she'd sort of said,
this is Leanne Dalziel.
Yes, Leanne Dann.
Just for those out of Christchurch.
It was the Christchurch East MP at the time of the earthquakes.
Yep.
And she said to me, look, I need somebody with financial experience to stand for council, because from what I understand, the council finances are in a real mess. And she said, would you consider running? And I hadn't really thought about local government. My focus was kind of global macro, not local.
Yeah.
And I sort of said, okay, well, look, I'll have a look at it. And I went to a few meetings, and I couldn't make head nor tail about what they were doing. It just seemed to be the most bizarrely structured thing.
Yeah.
Basically solve some basic outcomes. And I was there during that whole Tony Marriott insurance thing, whether he was representing the council or representing the insurance company that was insuring the council, and it all looked a bit strange to me. Anyway, so I kind of thought, okay, Leanne sort of said, look, I'll run for mayor if you stand for council. So I said, okay, let's do that. So I stood in Fendleton, and a lot of people just said to me, you're mad. No one's going to vote for you. Nobody knows who you are. You haven't been in local government before. And I said, well, I don't know. I've been living here for 10 years. I've got kids at school here. I do a lot of community work. I've worked for a lot of other NGOs like Refugee Resettlement, Pillars, Children of Prisoners, the Christchurch Arts Festival, Canterbury Junior Cricket. I did cricket coaching. Yep. And so I knew a lot of people in the community. And actually that was enough. And when I got elected, people were like, what? How did that happen? And I said, well, I just know a lot of people in the ward. And they just thought, well, this guy has a finance background. That's good enough. So, and to be honest, people often say that to me when I'm running in national politics. Oh, you'll never get elected, or no one's going to vote for you. But they often underestimate the importance of local networks, because those are the people who actually vote.
Well, so, I noticed in Christchurch, definitely the name recognition is much bigger in Christchurch, obviously. And I wondered, some people said to me, oh, he could have been mayor. And I wondered, why not, given there wasn't, I don't want to offend the mayor and the mayoral candidates, there wasn't a high profile, there wasn't a sort of a surplus of quality mayoral candidates in Christchurch. You could have gone down that path and sort of, why top, I guess, as opposed to keeping on with the local government.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in local. I think local government's got a lot of problems, but I think local decision making is really critical, and decentralization, I think, is the way forward. And obviously we've gone the other way in the last 5 years, which has obviously been a disaster. That's a different story. I think, look, when Leanne came to just 2019, and Leanne and I were having this discussion, and I was saying, look, if you want to run again, I won't stand against you. So I just made that very clear. But I said to her, look, if you do want to run again, be really clear about why you want to run again, because I said you'll win. That's not the issue, but you've got to do 3 years. And I think for a lot of politicians, they often don't think about that. And I think, well, what we've seen with our last two prime ministers is they have thought about that. They thought, I might win an election, but do I want to do another term afterwards? So it's a bit like, winning the war and delivering the peace. So Leanne made a decision that she would run again. So I said, okay, I'm out. And then also at the same time, we had the 15th of March attack. That was just 6 months out before the end of that second term. And I got very involved in that and really spent the next 2 years dealing with, and I still am from time to time, dealing with the survivors and victims, and dealing with the distribution of funds, and a whole bunch of other issues, the trial. And so when I kind of came out of that, I was pretty stuffed. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do next? And in a way, I sort of felt I had to take myself out of Christchurch for a while. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I was going to be constantly asked, are you going to stand for mayor next? Yeah. And so I went to Wellington, and where I had probably more work to do. And and that's why. So I decided not to get involved in the mayoral election because of that. And it was 2019. Yes, that would have been a different story. And if I'd stood, yes, probably I would have won that. And maybe things would have been different. So that didn't happen. And I think when Top approached me, I was actually at a point where I hadn't taken on anything permanent. And I just felt this was going to be an interesting election. I felt we're at a tipping point in the geopolitical cycle. I mean, you'll probably remember, the mid-1980s, everything changed. Yeah. Deregulation. And I think we're coming to the end of that cycle, which is essentially, global capital has kind of eaten itself up inside. We're having continual financial crises. We've got a new geopolitical structure emerging with a multipolar world. And New Zealand, I think, is frankly sliding backwards for the first time I've felt since I've been here.
Great. I mean, we'll come back to top policy, but Raf, while we're mentioning the 1980s, can I jump back to growing up and childhood and ask you a few questions around that? I usually start with a sort of a first memory of having your own money or holding money in your hand. Do you remember where you were and what was going on at that time?
Oh, God, yes, because my father was a bank manager. So
right, yeah.
I was brought up with, understanding money, and back in those days, checks. And my first job was in my dad's bank, in a summer job, I think, when I was 14, literally doing things like clearing checks in a basement in the bank in Moorgate, and getting lunch and vouchers. Now, some people might remember that from the old, I don't know if you had them in New Zealand, but essentially little vouchers to go and buy your lunch at a local sandwich shop. The old version of sort of pret-a-manger.
Yeah.
Type thing. And yeah, so for me, I was around money. I mean, not lots of money, but the concept of money quite early. And I had pocket money. I had a postal savings bank account at the local, as it was called then, the National Westminster Savings Bank. And I even remember, they had the shapes of the coins in your little passbook, like a 50 pence or a 20 pence. And yes, I was really into saving so that I could go and buy sweets or the football cards or whatever, comics and things like that. I did a paper round when I was at school. And I still remember the thrill. I think it was £4.50 a week or something. And the thrill of getting in a little sort of brown envelope, your coins. It was very So I was brought up very much with an idea of kind of earning and saving, and I worked pretty much every school holiday from when I was about 14 all the way through, paid for holidays myself. So had a fairly sort of good ethic around that.
Yeah, I mean, whereabouts did you grow up in London? Was it? I mean, I guess bank manager is a good job, but is it sort of felt like a classic middle class sort of upbringing?
Back then, it was sort of, I lived in a place called Burnt Oak, which for most people, Edgware, so it was the end of the Northern Line to the north of London. And it was I'd say it was a kind of mix. It was a mixture, it was mostly blue collar with a few white collar. So we had like there was an insurance sales guy, there was an actuary, Dad was a bank manager. But back then, people did all kinds of jobs. It was very, very different. It had a much heavier industrialized system. And the class differences weren't so stark. All the kids, went in and out of people's houses, and we played sport and cricket on the streets in between the cars. So a bank manager back then, pre-1984, was actually quite a boring type job. You actually lent money to businesses, which is quite strange, the way it's done these days. And I remember my dad, when there was back in the 70s, when Idi Amin kicked out all the Indians from Uganda, a lot of them turned up in London, and he actually lent quite a few of them money to start up businesses. So it was a more traditional banking job. There was nothing flashy about it. There were big bonuses. There were no investment banks. There were sort of old brokerages, and the US, investment banks had not arrived in town.
And I guess you will have had plenty of discussions in New Zealand about how we went through this, financial revolution and from '84. There was obviously similarities with Thatcher and all around the world. There's similarities, but do you recall watching that unfold in the UK, the sort of opening up of markets and sudden shift in the way the economy worked?
Yes and no. I mean, I was at university from 84 to 87. And I remember I was at the University of Manchester, where, a lot of us from London went just to sort of get away from London. And I remember Thatcher visiting once outside the student union, and there were things. And it was pretty...
This was the days of the young ones and all the alternative, protests and all that.
Yes, I mean, as a kind of student, look, I mean, we didn't have the internet. You were quite sort of insulated in the place you were. One thing that did happen that me and a bunch of friends got into was the privatizations happened. And, things like British Gas, British Telecom. And I mean, we all got involved in that. And we would actually go around the lecture theatres with people with forms and say, hey, why don't you kind of, put some money into this? And then, because it was just a gift, really, because everyone, I think that it was called stagging back in the days. So, we got involved in that type of thing. So there was a sense when we came out of university in 87, things had changed. I mean, my first job was in a stockbroker's in London, literally 2 months before the crash.
Right.
And that was sensational.
Do you remember the kind of the day?
I remember. I still remember, the teletext just being completely red. Yeah. And I'd actually been up in Manchester for the weekend, and I think we had a bizarre weather event. Came back on the Sunday, and it was heavy winds, and there was a big storm.
Yep.
And coming into work, and it was like, just no one knew what to do.
Yeah. So at university and just thinking about those choices to go and, I guess, following your father's lead but in banking, but, was money a driver in doing that, or were you just interested in the world of finance? What was the sort of, I presume you were studying commerce or something along those lines?
Yeah, actually, money wasn't the driver at all. I mean, I was actually hoping to read modern languages, funny enough. So I was going to do English, French, German. And I went to a careers thing at school. So I think I was going into the sixth form. And I thought, I'm going to read modern languages and go to Oxford and it will be great. And I went to the careers thing, and I obviously spoke to somebody, said, oh, no, you don't want to do that. You're never going to get a decent job or whatever. Why don't you do economics? You're really good at maths and you sort of understand a bit of that. So I ended up changing my A-levels to English, maths, economics. And that's where I went. So I ended up going to do economics, from an interest point of view. But kind of reading is still my first love when I think.
Yeah. So I mean, in that world, were you on the economics side, or when you talk about working for a broker, not necessarily trading, but what was your role there?
Well, my role actually, I mean, the role that I did really all the way through my sort of teens and into university and beyond was really accounting. I mean, I was kind of a sort of an auditing person and just very good at doing accounts, but also forensic auditing.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of temp work where companies just brought me in to sort out their accounts. And look, quite frankly, it's just adding up numbers.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there's nothing really more to it than that. And funny enough, when I'd finished working at that stockbroker, I think in December 87, I went traveling. So I went backpacking for a couple of years. And that's when I came to New Zealand. So I met a Kiwi girl in Bangkok, as you do. And we ended up back here. And I was working and we were in Sydney, and I was working for Ticketek, I basically did the auditing for the Brisbane Expo ticket sales operation. Yeah. And then they got me on to do a whole bunch of other projects. And then when I came back to London, my first job was at Bankers Trust, auditing their swaps books with derivatives. And I had no idea what a derivative was. I mean, I'd done a capital markets course at uni, third year, but derivatives were so new. And even my dad didn't know what they were. He goes, oh, is that like an FX forward? And I said, I have no idea. So I just but basically, essentially, it's a bunch of numbers, an interest rate, and a maturity. Everything starts there. And that was my first job. And then it was only when I got onto the trading floor where I was mixing with traders that they saw I had an aptitude for trading. So I used to do a lot of gambling at university. I was really into horse racing. Yeah. And so I used to bet with them all the time on stuff and run books on things. And they kind of said, oh, you should be working here. So I went up and worked on the derivatives desk doing short-term hedging in the short-term futures markets. And then I was trading with the FX guys, and they said, oh, you should come and work over here. So literally, that was the job interview. Yeah.
Well, that is quite a lively world. I mean, I sort of worked on the fringes of it in the 90s. The traders, the word wide boys, there was definitely a lot of, actually often young working class guys just who knew how to intuitively, like you say, gamble or when to put the money. There were systems, obviously, but it was quite a lively place. Did you have that experience?
Really, you think about your market trader, apples and pears, £5 for a pound or whatever. It's the same process. And Bankers Trust in London, where I ended up working as a currency trader, was probably the top desk in the world. No doubt about it. And we tried to work out, looking at the successful people around the desk, what to look for in people, because everyone was very different, and we were trying to work out what are the common denominators here, and obviously the ability to take risk, but also probably the ability to take losses and move on. So you need to have some, you need to have some kind of spirit around that. So, but we worked out that we had a couple of people who were really good at chess and really good at bridge. And we thought, oh, why don't we sort of look at people like that? So we hired this guy who was actually a world speed chess champion. Like, he'd beaten Kasparov, super smart. And this, if you watch him play speed chess, it was before computer. It was all on the boards, and we thought, wow, this guy is, he'll be great. And actually, he was a hopeless trader because trading is about this second.
Yeah.
Not really. You don't have to think 10 moves ahead. You just have to think about right now. And so it's essentially making on the spot decisions, balancing up risks very, very quickly. And I think, when you look at, say, John Key, who I used to work with, he was at Banks Trust in Auckland, and his ability to make decisions.
It's quite intuitive, isn't it?
Very intuitive. But you're weighing up a lot of information, but you're weighing it up quite quickly. Yeah. But often it's an intuitive decision. And sometimes you get it wrong, but you kind of move on. And I think, you could see that in the way that he ran things. And, speaking to some of his ministers, sometimes they'd sort of say, oh, John was really interesting. He just, we'd sort of say, well, what do you want us to do? It's like, well, yeah, do what you've suggested. And if there's a problem, give me a call. It was that sort of type of approach to things. So you learn a lot about risk taking, which, has obviously impacts in real life. But essentially it was looking for people who had the ability to process a lot of information and also realize you're dealing with huge amounts of money. So there's always that sense you could get into trouble and get fired the next day. So you needed to have some level of kind of confidence in your abilities and the ability to take a loss and then get back on the saddle, the next day.
Talking about risk, what is the sort of, I guess, the biggest risks you've taken, the most, we sort of ask about the most indulgence or biggest purchase you've ever made, but also the poorest you've ever been. Are there some ups and downs there?
Poorest, yeah. I poorest. When I was left university, I had some debts and I probably spent more than I was earning. I didn't have a lot of income.
There's a lot of risk in if you're a keen social gambler, there's potentially risk, right?
Yeah, well, that wasn't really a lot of money, but
right. So you knew how to keep that in perspective.
Yeah, but I think I probably never. I've lived frugally, definitely, and so I'd had some debts when I went traveling, and borrowed a bit of money to go traveling, but I paid it all back when I came home. But I had to be very, very frugal, and also when traveling. I remember arriving in Sydney with literally a £50 traveller's check in my pocket, and I arrived on a Thursday, went to a backpackers. Went to a job agency on a Friday. They got me a job starting on Monday. And I turned up on Monday. I literally didn't have a penny.
Yeah.
I think I had to buy a tie. I was working actually as Perpetual Trustees in, I think, 100 Street, Sydney. And I was wearing my Nepali trekking jacket, some faded denim trousers, a denim shirt I bought at Bangkok. Yeah. I didn't have any sort of work clothes. And I bought a tie on the way in from an op shop for like 50 cents. And I don't think I even had money for my lunch. So I had to borrow money. So, there was that cash flow management. And I think, if anyone wants to know the most important rule in life about money, it's cash. Cash is king.
Yeah.
And being able to manage cash flow and kind of operate and essentially cut your cloth to fit with what you have. So I think whenever I sort of in those early years was tight on money, I would just be very frugal.
Yeah.
And at that time in Sydney, I saved up, I think I worked for 7 weeks, saved up, I don't know, about $1,700 to go to Sydney to go to Christchurch to see my girlfriend who was over here. And I think I had spaghetti and tomato sauce for dinner every night.
Yeah. You talk about cash being king. I guess that's what sinks most big companies, isn't it? Even the banking crisis of the last few months. If they can't get their hands on cash at the wrong time or the right time, it can all go under. Doesn't matter how good the rest of the books might look.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we see it time and time again. And I think the SVB thing was slightly weird because it was Silicon Valley Bank and there were lots of influencers, but essentially it was a bank run. But also I can think of companies here that I've had shares in. Wynyard Holdings springs to mind.
Yeah.
The market cap, I don't know, $250, $500 million. They basically run out of money.
Yeah.
And for a board of a company that size to run out of cash and I still haven't had satisfactory answers about
yeah.
In terms of what happened. That's really poor management. And any business, and I've been involved in lots of startups, which is a different beast because you are constantly, trying to raise capital. But for a business which actually has got big revenues, big market cap, the fact they can still go bust tells us actually that, cash management is a big challenge for all businesses.
Yeah.
And it's probably the most important thing alongside the other mantra I have that, a good idea doesn't make a good business, so
yeah.
which is a challenge for a lot of startup investors, even like myself. So having cash is important, and being able to budget is probably the most important thing that we can teach our children, because it applies at all levels, and it's the same with governments as well, I have to say.
Yeah. Just coming back to getting to New Zealand, 2002. I mean, the City of London was humming all the way through, I guess, till 2007, 2008, when it all went pear-shaped again. But you obviously decided to opt out of that at that time, 2002. I mean, it was pretty much booming, I guess, in London at that time.
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of issues. We had young children, and we were deciding whether to stay in London or move back.
And your partner is the Kiwi girl you referenced earlier. Is that the?
Yeah, we're not together now, but yeah, we were married and moved back here.
Sort of brought you back here, yeah.
Yeah, and we sort of were humming and hawing about it. And I'd looked at moving to New Zealand in '95, I think it was. In fact, John and I were going to do a job swap. So he wanted to move to London, and I thought, well, I want to move to New Zealand. So I remember coming down to Auckland and him showing me around the place. And
so when you say John, is John Key. So you were friends well before the.
Yeah, so we worked together at Bankers Trust.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so friends well before the politics and
oh yes, yeah. And he took me around and showed me his house, and I thought, crikey, this is nice.
Yeah.
I was, I didn't know Auckland well. I knew Christchurch well. I didn't know Auckland. We'd always come here on holidays. And I really thought hard about it. And in fact, I'd sort of negotiated a deal with Bankers Trust in Auckland for me to move here. But the Bankers Trust in London didn't like the idea of me. And they said, oh, you're too young. It's too far away. There's nothing going on there. And so they said, why don't you go to New York? So they sent me to New York for a week to look around and look at apartments. And I thought, I'm not coming here with a sort of, 2-year-old child. So in the end, we stayed in London. But when we got to 2000, we had 2 kids. They were sort of 5 and 7. And we thought, look, is it time to move? And I'd left the markets. Essentially, I'd got to the point where, money didn't interest me particularly. And I'd gone back to university part-time, actually, whilst I was proprietary trading, which was a bit odd. And I was studying human rights law and social psychology, and I was just getting into other things.
And this is, I guess, like when to get to that point, you've got to be comfortable. You'd had investments that have sort of given you that base to be able to, I guess, to be able to put money to one side as a focus. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, comfortable, comfortable, definitely, but not too comfortable.
Yeah.
So really the opportunities for me then, when I got sort of 2000, were either go to a hedge fund or go into management. I wasn't interested in management at all, and I didn't want to go into a hedge fund either. So I left, and it was a bit of a shock to people. I was only 33, and I just thought there's other things I want to do in life. And earning loads of money wasn't one of them, and we had enough, and we had, a nice lifestyle, and that was fine. And it was actually, funny enough, it was 9/11 that was the final sort of nail in that decision. And I remember watching that live, and, I had friends in New York, and it was a shocking thing. And I just thought, okay, I'd felt that Europe, having traded a lot of Europe product prior to the euro coming in, I just felt the euro was not going to work, because without the kind of monetary and fiscal union, it was just always going to be a problem for the countries that were, struggling to sort of meet budget deficit requirements and debt requirements. And I think it has kind of turned out like that a little bit. Anyway, so we just thought, okay, 9/11, right? Okay, we're going to New Zealand. Yeah. So literally, pretty much just put the house on the market, and we were in New Zealand in February 2002. And so that was a big life shift, definitely. And it took a while to sort of settle into New Zealand. But, like I said, I went back to university, and just got into community stuff. And life.
What were you studying at uni that time?
Political science.
Political science. Oh, yeah. Is that?
Yeah, so political science, and I enjoyed that, but yeah, no, it was interesting, particularly New Zealand politics, which I knew nothing about. So
when you look at some, you're doing political science and you're thinking about your own politics, I guess, and this goes to top a little bit, where do you land on that traditional political spectrum, or does it just become a bit meaningless to you?
Look, I think I'm very solutions focused, but interestingly enough, in my first election, which I think was probably that 2002 election, so I'd arrived here and I knew nothing about New Zealand politics at all, and so I thought, okay, I'm just going to read what people have got to say, and I ended up, you had got 2 votes. Well, that's cool. So I ended up voting Green and ACT in 2002.
Yeah.
In some respects, a lot of people think, TOP is sort of almost a combination of a traditional Green Party, so, and a traditional ACT Party. So in a way, essentially a Liberal Party, which ACT probably was more back in 2002. Now they're a bit more reactionary. And the Green Party, which was very much more environmentally focused. And that's where my interest was. And I think, in a way, the Opportunities Party is very much that sort of modern Liberal Party. So it's progressive, egalitarian, but focused on economic efficiency as well.
But you can reconcile the idea that governments and regulation can exist and be important. I guess your Keynes and your Friedman, you can reconcile those two camps. I mean, because a lot of times we end up they sort of get stuck on it's all or nothing, one way or the other. All government intervention is bad, or all markets are bad. And I sometimes feel in New Zealand that we kind of, we probably haven't got time for this, but polarising through the 80s has kind of left us with this kind of tribal aspect to it, and I suspect that's what you guys are trying to get over.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you're absolutely right. I think my observation is that, in a way, the stain and the scars of the 80s inform a lot of New Zealand politics. And I often find it's people who were not born in New Zealand or not from New Zealand, but have come here as adults. They don't have that. And they often get a bit frustrated and think, why do they keep going on about this stuff the whole time? It's such a big part of the New Zealand psyche. And if we can get over that, I think it will help. And I think, my sense is a lot of the, traditional political parties are stuck, and they're stuck in those old ways of thinking. And we're trying to sort of say, okay, hold on a second, we've got problems here. Yeah, it's not one or the other. We're probably going to have a mixed economy. The role of the government is important, but we need to really promote innovation. How do we do this stuff? We need a healthy environment that is functioning. We've got to deal with climate change. We can work most of these things out, I think. But I think actually politics is what's holding us back, which is a shame. And a lot of that is to do with the MMP system and the threshold. And that's got to change. And I think if it doesn't change this election, we're in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the obvious question, and I do ask everyone this, is, but if you were in power, what is the one policy you would first, or you prioritise to implement to, I guess, address poverty, social inequality, all those things, try and get the country over that?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's quite simple. It's a universal basic income funded by a land value tax. That's probably the big switch that we need to make. And the good thing about it is it can be done. It's deliverable. It's not like we're going to build 100,000 houses. It's a settings issue. So I see, the New Zealand. So if you look at it like a sound dashboard, we just need to change our settings around tax. That is a big issue.
I mean, does that make you? I mean, is it? You use a different phraseology, but it's almost like a capital gains tax as a plank. Is that? Would you say that's?
I mean, a land value tax is essentially, you could say, is a capital gains tax charged over 30 years at 1%. So if you have a 30% capital gains tax, you're going to pay 1% a year rather than 30% at the end.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it's a lot more complex than that in some ways, but it's encouraging the productive use of land as well. That's the important thing. So the fact, I mean, when I moved here, I was just shocked. The idea of owning a second house in London would be like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
It was
It is a strange national obsession, isn't it?
It was like, and I remember buying some commercial property when I got here, basically just built a sort of diversified investment portfolio, pretty standard stuff. And people are just like, oh, okay, you've got that now. We'll get it revalued in 2 years and then go again. I'm going, what? It's like, I'm just buying this for income.
The other one that makes me laugh is that Kiwis are almost unique in our desire to refix our mortgages every 6 months or 2 years, as if we're going to beat the international debt markets. And I just think, well,
I have always funded at the 12-month level, and obviously that's gone a bit pear-shaped recently. That's a whole different conversation. Which I think we should.
Well, I will narrow it back to so we have got an election coming up. You are stuck with the 5% threshold. I mean, can you get there? Can you get the message out, or is your focus on winning Ilam? Is that
the focus is on winning Ilam? So I realised last year that 5% was going to be difficult, given there are actually a lot of parties. So it's really a matter. It's not that we couldn't get 5%, but when people come to voting, there is only 100% of the pie to go around. And actually, if you look at the polling over the last 18 months, it's been completely consistent that Labour and National, with their respective partners, are at 45% each. And within it goes up and down. But essentially, that's it. And the election is probably going to be decided by the other 10%. Then again, our approach to working in Parliament, when we get in, is to work collaboratively. So, we want Parliament to work differently. I want these parties to be working together to try and solve some of these problems.
I mean, some of these things, the big things, are going to need to be bipartisan, or we're just going to flip-flop for even...
We cannot be making decisions on a 51-49 basis, because that's where we get polarisation.
Yeah, and in terms of funding the top party, is that still, is it still got, is Gareth Morgan and Morgan Foundation still involved? How does that all work?
No, Gareth left in 2018, so he's been a long time.
Yeah.
So look, we're funded essentially by our monthly small donors. We've got about 300 small donors. I don't think we've had a donation over 5,000.
So it's pretty lean.
It's like a bootstrapped startup. So I take a very small income, just to keep me going. Actually, it's a very small income, 2,000 a month. But and I put some money. You'll like this story because it's a money story. Yeah. So I bought some gold a while ago, probably about 10 years ago, some actual gold coins, and I've been keeping them for a rainy day. Like, I had 10 ounces, and I just sold them recently. So I was up in Auckland, took the gold coins up. I've never taken them out of the wrapper. They've literally sat in a drawer at home, and I thought, look, I need a bit of cash for this campaign. Yeah. And you can't rely on donors, and I don't know whether big donors are going to support us. I don't know. And so I went into New Zealand Mint. I said, hey, I want to sell some gold. Here you go. Sold them. And gold was at the all-time high.
Yeah, it was doing all right, wasn't it, because of the rest of the instability?
Yeah, $3,100 an ounce, so fair enough. And the guy takes me, he goes, are you Raf Manji from the top party?
Yeah.
I said, yeah. I said, this is funding my campaign. So it's... So we don't have a lot of money. We can't compete with the big parties with millions of dollars. That's just nuts. Yeah. So, having said that, obviously I'm at home in Ilam. I've been the city councillor here for 6 years. I stood in 2017 and came second. I know a lot of people here. I'd say 50% of the doors that I door knock on, they immediately recognise me as councillor. And I just say, look, I'm just looking for your electorate vote, and they go, yeah, no problem.
It could potentially be quite a powerful position. You could work with either party, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The way the electoral position we're taking, which we'll explain in more depth, is we will go on the crossbenches and we will abstain on a vote of confidence. So essentially, whichever party bloc can form a minority government, essentially, without 2 or 3 seats, help yourself. Go to the Governor-General and say that you can... form a government. And then we will do policy and legislation as it comes, like the NDP do in Canada.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're not about to do a deal and try and convince one of the majors to pull out of Ilam?
No. No, I think I'm in a pretty strong position here. But it's up to I say to the other party, it's up to you to win the election. Yeah. We're not going to play a part in that. Our job is actually to make better policy that works and can be delivered. and change the way Parliament operates, because the challenges that we've got coming are going to be incredibly complex. And if you think what happened with the COVID response, particularly the financial response, the fact that one party was over that was problematic, and dealing with the outcomes of not having enough feedback in that decision making.
Yeah, and look, I'll just finish up by giving you a chance to sort of, the party pitch, I guess. But I guess the issue for you will be to try and avoid being seen as, oh, you're the dead centre. People have memories of Peter Dunn and the United Party, and the idea that the centre is kind of a bit bland and vanilla. Do you have a way to sort of pitch what you're doing that sort of gets across the idea that it's not just about sitting in the middle, it's more sort of about policy ideas on either side?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you could say with a radical centre, I mean, if you look at the policies, the tax switch is a big policy. Now, when I talk to tax specialists, they're pretty excited about it because of the way we framed it. And look, I bumped into David Parker at the airport. He goes, I like that tax switch idea. I said, yeah, why don't you do it?
Yeah.
And of course, he'd love to do it. He just doesn't have any support in his cabinet. But maybe next week we'll see him come out with something. I think they'll copy quite a lot of what we've done. The teal card that we've pushed out for under 30s with fully funded healthcare, public transport, a new national civic service model, including financial literacy, which I'm working on with a few companies. That is very exciting. So we're not like Peter Dunn. I'm not going to sit here and be minister of whatever. We're here to actually make change. So I think when we talk about the centre, we just mean that we can actually talk to other parties. Like when I say to people, yes, we'll talk to ACT, people on the left have a complete meltdown when, it's just stupid, so everyone has got into these tribal positions. And I've had a conversation with David Seaman, and I've said, look, there's a lot of your policies I don't agree with, but if you want to sort out the public service and how it spends money, I'm really happy to sit down with you and go through every departmental budget and work through that. And no doubt we can do things more efficiently. That's the way that I approach it. But politics here in New Zealand, it's basically about hating on the other side, which is not going to get us anywhere. Yeah.
Raf, thanks for that. We're going to have to leave it there. I would be great to chat to you as the election campaign unfolds. But thanks for coming and thanks for talking today.
Thanks for your time.
Cheers. And thank you for listening. If you've got feedback, drop me a line, liam.dan@nzherald.co.nz. Thanks to my producer, Ethan Sills, and our editor, Leanne McDonald. Follow Money Talks on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. Catch you again next week.